So welcome to our panel today. We are going to talk about how to take people from first PR to lifelong impact. So getting people to contribute and then stay in your project, and getting people from backgrounds that maybe you don't already have in your project. So we're going to talk a lot about that. So let's start with some very short introductions. I'll start since I'm already talking. I'm Dawn Foster. I'm the Director of Data Science for the CHAOS project. I have been working in open source for a very long time, 25 plus years. Mostly, my background, despite being a data scientist now, my background is actually OSPOs and big companies. So I've worked at companies like VMware, Intel, Puppet, other places. So with that, I will turn it over to Ruth.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ruth. I'm a community manager at the CHAOS project, specifically for the CHAOS Africa chapter, which I would, talk about a lot during the panel. But I'm mostly involved in building capacity programs for youth in Africa to get engaged in open source. So I think this topic is really dear to my heart. So I'm excited to share my experience with you all.
My name is Shuah. I am a kernel maintainer and Linux fellow at the Linux Foundation. I lead mentorship programs at the Linux Foundation in addition to my kernel maintenance duties. And I am happy to be here talking about things that are mentoring and all of the things that are near and dear to my heart as well. So I'm in good company.
Yes. What's up? My name is Matt, aka Mohawk. You figure that out. Why you get a prize? I've been in open source for about 3 years. Non-traditional open source person, coming from the marketing, sales, communication background, who felt very discouraged at first, not thinking I had ways that I could contribute. So really excited for this conversation. I've worked on projects like Intoto, Tough, Zarf, Witness, Archivist, and those kinds of things.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So let's start with a question for Ruth. Why don't you tell us more about how CHAOS Africa has been helping contributors get involved and then stay involved in open source?
Okay, so if you are not familiar with the CHAOS project, we create metrics and software to help other open source communities measure health. And then CHAOS Africa is a local chapter. So we have local chapters. I think we have about 4 local chapters in Africa, LATAM, in the Balkans, and Asia Pacific. So I happen to lead the CHAOS Africa chapter. And then now, I think it started in 2022, so the CHAOS project has been on since 2017. And one of the reasons when I got into the CHAOS project in 2020, that was, fresh out of university, wanted to get into tech. And I think I was the only, I think there was an outreach intern then that was in the CHAOS project, the only African, so I was the second person. So over time, and the CHAOS project is very fun, I'm sure you've heard of it a couple of times in a couple of panels. So over time, I understood that, this is a community I want to be in. This is a community I want others to be in as well. So how do I get people to contribute? And context, again, from where I come from, we have a lot of new people getting into tech that want to learn about open source, that want to build a career in open source. So I see that, yes, this is a good place, this is a good community, a community that, cares about people, and there's so many ways to contribute beyond code, right? And people want to get involved. So I started doing advocacy, started doing workshops for people to get involved, and people started coming, and then we started the chapter in 2022. Now, one of the big things is recognizing where your contributors are at, which, like I said, we had a lot of beginners that were new to tech and also new to open source. So now when I knew that, these people are new to tech and open source, I'm like, this is, how do I get them to contribute and also stay? And when people are new to open source, tools are hard for them to use. Tools like Git, tools like using GitHub, or even understanding how open source works. How do I even, if I have an idea, how do I raise my hand? How do I do that, right? So it was, let's start by educating people what open source is and how to get involved. So that was one of the strategies. And then when you educate them, you want to educate them about the principles of open source. This is what open source is about. This is how you should contribute, or this is how you can contribute. This is how you can get involved. And then creating pathways that they can actually make their contributions. So I started seeing more people get involved. Who are these people? They are designers, developers. So we created kind of a smaller groups. So in the Chaos Project, we do work by working groups, right? The different context working groups. So for the chapter, I created these smaller groups where people could meet as designers, people could meet as developers, technical writers. We even had researchers at the point. So I created those groups for people to come together in smaller groups and then contribute in their own way. So that was also another step to getting them to stay. And then the last thing I want to talk about is recognition, contributor recognition. Now, regardless of how small or how big their changes were, I always had that thing of recognizing them in the community, trying to spotlight them in the social, or trying to have ways where they could, during meetings, we could say, oh, thank you for your contribution. So these different things kind of helped people stay and not just contribute, but keep coming back. And I think, one last thing is having social events. I kind of used to do that a lot. At the end of the year, we have these social events where beyond just contributing and making the software better, we come together, have coffee, have a drink, do karaoke, things like that. It really helps people stay back in the community.
All right, thanks, Ruth. I think the next question I'm going to kick over to Matt. So why don't you talk about some of the CNCF initiatives and then also other initiatives outside of the CNCF that are designed to get people involved from other underrepresented backgrounds, and talk about how that's worked to get people more involved in open source projects.
Yeah, so one thing I forgot to mention too is I'm a facilitator for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Working Group in CNCF and across Linux Foundation, and also have my own version of hearing loss. And so that group and groups like it are really incredible because there's so many people out there that want to contribute, but they don't always know how to ask, especially in the deaf and hard of hearing community. It's difficult to assimilate when not everyone's welcome. This is a very welcome community, but not everywhere is in the world. And so that kind of muscle memory kind of prohibits people from looking at oh, maybe I could jump in there. Maybe they would be willing to work with me on different ways that I can get involved with my hearing or visual or whatever impairment that may be. But there's so many communities across CNCF, across Linux Foundation, across OpenSSF, and just the internet in general. There's so many people out there in underrepresented groups, in the deaf and hard of hearing community, in the blind and visual impact community. I don't think I said that wrong. Visual impact, I don't know if that's right.
Visual impairment, maybe?
That's the word I'm looking for. Visual impairment, so please don't hate me if I said it incorrectly, and that's you. But part of that is when I joined open source, I felt very discouraged because didn't feel like I could contribute. And while it's not officially an underrepresented group, even being in marketing and sales in the developer world, I felt very excluded, very alienated. It actually wasn't until this guy right here in the hoodie, John Schill, who we worked together, helped me find other ways to contribute, other ways to, hey, open source projects, they don't know how to talk to people most of the time. Maybe you can just help them do a webinar, help them write a blog, help them share their story, what's going out. And I found success and joy in doing that, and then also working with, that's kind of when the same time I found the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Working Group. I wasn't looking for it from a place where I need help. I was looking from just a way that I could help other people get access to other things. And that's what's so amazing, is there's so many people out there that may not be willing or afraid to ask to contribute to your projects or get involved, or maybe that's even you. And I'll pause there to leave the rest of it later.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So Shuah, you've been leading mentorship programs at the Linux Foundation for the last 6 years. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've used some of those mentoring programs to get people more involved in projects like the Linux kernel, but other projects as well.
Right. So designing and running the programs is it requires thinking about how to help and who is wanting that help. And when I got started in the kernel, I have 2 boys. I have 2 boys' mom, and I had a working full-time work that I was balancing, and also wanting to learn to get into open source. So I did all of that, and one of my boys is here right now, cheering me on. So when I took all of that, when I designed this program, and saying, we have students out there that are managing class load, and then also wanting to expand their horizons and learning to see what technology is out there, what can they do after they graduate. There are others, career professionals that are doing something and they want to challenge themselves, growth mindset, they want to get into different areas and learn. So how do you do that? And they have their work hours, they are managing their projects, and they have personal lives, they might have children, they might have spouses, all of that. So how do you do that? So that went into designing this program to work for everybody. The other aspect of it is learning styles. People have different learning styles. Some people are tinkerers, some people are researchers, some people need to get in there and then nuts and bolts and play with things. So how do you make the programs work for everybody? And how do you provide resources, webinars, all of the blogs or learning resources that work for everybody? That's what went into this program that I designed. So it has been successful and it's very fulfilling. I also mentor kernel developers while leading this program. So I mentor about 150 developers, new developers every year. So it's been great.
And just as a reminder, and for those of you that came in a bit later, the slides are already uploaded on Sketch. The next couple of slides talk about and have links to things like the mentoring programs, Chaos Africa, Chaos Education, some of the deaf and hard of hearing, blind and visually impaired, working groups. So the slides have loads of links that I'm probably not going to show here because links are better if you can click on them. So they're already uploaded to Sketch. So with that said, does anybody have any questions? We've got a microphone in the back that we need for the recording and for people online. Yes, Courtney.
Question.
Wait for the mic. There we go.
Thank you. So I am attending this event as part of the FAIR project that was announced. One of the things that in WordPress we're working on is contributor dashboards. And I've certainly connected with the Chaos folks. I'd like to attract a very unusual skill set to WordPress to help with that. Data scientists that can take the raw data of contribution and help narrate what that story is when we publish the findings of that. Do you have any ideas for me on how to attract perhaps skill sets to contribute that are not within the normal realm?
That's a really good question. As the data scientist on the panel, maybe I'll start with that. It can be challenging to bring in other people from different skill sets into the project. I think data science in particular is a slightly different one because the problem is, like data scientists, you have everything from people who spend all their time in AI and machine learning to people like me who don't do any of that, frankly, and I spend a lot of time interpreting data and telling people what it means. So you not only have to look for data scientists, but you have to look for data scientists that actually have the skills that you're looking for, because that interpretation of data also requires a fair bit of context and a fair bit of experience. So I would look to people who are maybe more experienced within the community, and not necessarily data scientists, but just people who spent a lot of time around data and have a lot of context as a way to help recruit some of those people.
Yeah, I can add something. So one of the things that I started when I started the community, because I started it from scratch, specifically the Chaos Africa community, was looking into other technology groups. So in Nigeria, we have a lot of technology groups that are not open source specific, right? And these people are trying to get into open source or trying to contribute to open source. So I started doing like targeted outreach to those communities, like, oh yeah, like this is a data science community, or this is a Python community, because we have a lot of like Python software groups in all around the world. And I'm like, oh, I want to do a workshop with your community members to, get them interested. If they're interested in contributing to open source as a data scientist, this is how you can do it. So those targeted outreach kind of like helps with attracting specific set of people, in addition to what Dawn said as well.
I will definitely echo what Ruth is saying. If you identify communities that you want to reach out to, and some of these kinds of venues are a good option. You can do a BOF, bird of feather session, and say, this is what our goals are, this is what we are trying to achieve, and depending on the communities you are trying to target, maybe kernel community or CNCF or something, you can pick a conference to go and then do your BOF or any of the other presentations. So just seek help, and so that get the engagement that way, get the word out.
You want me to go, or are we moving on?
You don't have to. You
Okay.
don't have to. Okay. Next question. Anybody else have a question over here in front? We're just going to make you run back and forth. You
well,
got to get your steps in today. It's all good.
Thank you. I'm quite curious to get your experience to maybe talk about what do we think, the very difficult time, right? That somebody might put themselves out there. Here's my first PR, my first, I don't know, commit, whatever it is, right? Which I assume the person will get a lot of imposter syndrome feeling, outsider feelings. And in your experience, how do we maybe help communities focus on that sensitive time? Because I would think that's like critical, where you can gain them for a long time or lose them. If you can talk a little bit about that specific moment.
So just to help understand, you're talking like how to kind of help nurture those new contributors or people doing it for the first time?
Yeah, at the time where they start to put themselves, take the trust, and getting all those feelings like, what have I done?
Yeah. No, I love that question, because I've been in that situation in a variety of ways. I still haven't made my first PR because I'm not a coder, but John's going to make me do it eventually. But I think the ways I've seen that work are kind of assigning them a buddy. Like, I come from the military, so the term battle buddy is a common phrase I use, but kind of giving them a battle buddy of like, hey, we noticed you've jumped into the Slack channel. We've noticed you've jumped into here. We'd like to help. We'd like to just, hey, so-and-so Mike or so-and-so Michelle, they're going to help you guide any questions you got, because then it helps the person feel seen. And that's really what most people want to do in life. They just kind of want to be seen and heard. And it's kind of the simplest things like that of just finding, just kind of guiding and saying, hey, you're not alone. It's okay if your first PR sucks. It's okay. Like, that's why there's other people to help review it. And just having that conversation of like, it's okay to just start and be uncomfortable, but then having that battle buddy they can kind of go back to. And so if you are in those communities and you are someone that's been in that community for a long time, I encourage you to go and say, hey, how are we welcoming new people? What are we doing are we paying attention to who's in the Slack, who's in Git, and who's in the areas that they jump into, and just kind of take it on yourself to help say, hey, I don't want them to be lost, so let's create something.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what he said, and I'm borrowing this from Jen's talk yesterday about not focusing on individuals but on systems. So I think a big question is asking yourself, are you fostering an environment or creating an environment where people can, grow or make those first PRs and not feel intimidated? Because in open source spaces, sometimes when people create these PRs and send them, maintainers can be really, like the comments, exactly. So you also need to set systems where, or rules or like the code of conduct where people can feel safe. So also like, make mistakes as well. So that's also something that the community should ask themselves, like, how are we creating spaces or ways where people can, create these PRs and feel safe, even though it's not what is, or how do people respond to other people when they're trying to correct them or trying to tell them, okay, you have to do this the other way, this is not how we do it here, things like that. So that's also another thing just to add.
Right. So adding to that, in Kernel space is a little bit different. We do have 10,000 developers, and we really don't know often who is. Oh,
It turned off.
oh, no, it is on.
I think move it to the center a little bit.
That's better? Is that better? Okay.
You have to
Only a
talk
little
louder,
bit.
too.
Okay, I'll talk louder. So, I'll throw my voice back there. So kernel community is a little bit different. So what happens is we have 10,000 developers all across the globe, and we do development using emails. So the only thing we know about anybody is when they approach us, they send a patch. And then when they send a patch, we don't always know whether they are new or new to the development process or not. So the mentorship helps in that aspect, that we tell them mentor pairing up with mentor helps in that aspect. Another thing we have done is we have a lot of documentation in the kernel on how to submit patch. We will go very detailed how to write change log, to the extent that we tell them how we want to see change logs, what kind of change logs we prefer. We do that, and then another thing we do is we are a community. As a community, when somebody comes and says, I am new to the community, most people in the community are helpful. Welcoming and helpful communities are a key to making somebody feel like we are welcoming newcomers and we are not shutting the door. So that is a sense of belonging. And the other thing is code of conduct, of course. We do have code of conduct, and we make sure that when somebody is not treating somebody right, the community members go out and respond publicly and say, hey, this person is new, or this is not the right way to treat your peers, and then we do all of that. All of these combined help welcoming. But having said all of that, you still have to overcome that fear of putting yourself out there. Once you do that, we can help you achieve your goals. I think that's what it is. Communities need to create safe spaces, and places are welcoming, and then give them a sense of belonging. That's how you retain people as well.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm working at an academic OSPO, so we're just starting our OSPO at UC San Diego. And what I want to know, we're looking for opportunities to get mentorships. We're trying to build out programs to help our students know how to work in the community, how to use GitHub, how to do version control, set expectations that your first contribution might not be accepted, but don't give up, because that's natural part of learning. I'm wondering, is there any advice you could give me, or any programs or ideas for helping our students go from helping us to reduce the barriers, the entry barriers. We're doing the education, we're doing kind of set the expectations. What else could we be doing as an academic OSPO, and what programs could we be tapping into to help us get our students there?
Yeah, I could start with giving a plug so at the Chaos Project, we have educational courses. We started creating that early this year or late last year. And these courses are geared towards beginners, new contributors, what is open source about? How do I contribute to open source? And even how do I get involved in the Chaos Project? So I'm not sure if your OSPO already has projects that they can contribute to, but if there are already projects they can get involved in, it's something about creating documentation that can help them contribute to those projects in smaller ways, in smaller bits, not because again, like from what you've shared, your contributors are more beginners, right? So you need to create beginner-friendly issues or beginner-friendly ways that they can get involved, right? And then another thing is, when you're building out the mentorship program, I think peer mentoring, I've seen it to work a lot between between beginners, like getting them to pair up together, because then at those points they can make mistakes, they recognize their own mistakes, and they do not feel like, oh, like I feel scared to talk to my higher mentor because I feel like they have a lot of more experience. But when you do peer mentoring between them, kind of like matching them up together, they learn better that way. So you could also introduce that peer mentoring model in addition to the mentorship model that you want to also introduce.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's very simple in trying to create less barriers for entry. So everyone learns and contributes differently. I learn visually and through more video. Like if you give me something to read, I'm not going to read it. And even if you require me, you pay me, I'm just not going to do it because I don't learn that way. I can't comprehend very well that way. I learn by having a conversation, by watching a video. So if you're trying to pull people into those communities, this goes back to your question as well, is having multiple ways they can enter. Having them, if you don't want to talk to anyone ever, here's 50 pages of steps that you can go every step and find a way to contribute. If you want to watch this video, here's a video from our team. If you want to watch this, or if you want to join a panel, or if you want to join a thing, trying to make it so that when they get approached or when they're wanting to get involved and getting interested, or he's helping them get interested, making it so like they almost can't say no. It's so easy for them to join that they're like, oh yeah, look, this is just great. I can learn in my way.
So some of the universities I have come across do this. One in Brazil, for example, they do boot camps and hackathons for coders. And they will reach out to us sometimes, to kernel community, and say, what would you like us to work on? Do you want us to write documentation? Do you want to work on a specific test cases, or what subsystem would be, kernel subsystem would be? And they even seek help in terms of suggesting things that they can work on in the hackathon setting. And then they set themselves a goal of sending patches upstream after each hackathon. It will be a 4-hour hackathon or a day. That is something that would be very helpful for definitely for coders, developers, and then also somebody that wants to write documentation, or maybe even translations, because kernel, we have a lot of documentation. We do translate. People send translation patches to us. So that would be another thing. We are always looking for that. And another thing we do is we don't know all of the languages. So we look for somebody else to review that. So that's another value add. So if somebody can translate from the group, you could create those kind of tasks and run hackathons. I think that works very well. That addresses your thing about face-to-face as well.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of going and helping an instructional setting. Somebody walks you through your first patch. So that would be something I would recommend doing.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do that can help is having some kind of community-based Q&A to help scale your OSPO. So when I worked at VMware, we had a pretty good-sized OSPO, but we had a massive company, right? So we had just an open source Slack channel, and it was really interesting because it was sort of started with the idea that people could ask the OSPO questions. But what we found was happening was that before we could even get to it, somebody else within the community who had run into the same thing had probably already answered that question for us. And so especially in academic OSPOs, where the OSPOs tend to be quite small and the student population tends to be quite large, you need to look for ways that you can scale it. And so, looking for ways that you can get more people involved can help. Other questions? Okay, well, I have another one on my little list. Unless we can answer? Okay.
No, I mean, if they don't ask questions, they got to come and talk, right?
Okay, so people tend to think of code contributions when we talk about contributions to open source, but there are loads of ways to contribute. So maybe we can just talk about some of those other ways to contribute and why they're so important to open source projects. I don't know, Matt or Ruth, if you want to start.
Yeah, I got a question actually. Who's a non-coder, non-developer? And do any of you all contribute in any ways now? I want to ask you guys, how do you guys contribute?
Documentation
Documentation and editing. What else?
I run the outreach. I'm the chair of the outreach committee for OpenAPI.
There we go. What else? Oh, chair of outreach. What we got?
A lot user support stuff, mostly new user support.
User support. Oh, that's a great one.
Curriculum development, marketing, facilitating meetings, mentorship.
That's awesome. Couple more.
Governance and mentoring.
Yeah, that's great. What was that? Okay, community improvement and program management. So, and the reason I flipped it is because there's so many ways you can contribute. And this is what I felt when I first joined. I had so many conversations like, I don't know if I could, this is cool. Because I was attracted to this world because of how collaborative it is. But at first I didn't know there was ways. And so as background in marketing, sales, communication, that kind of thing, I started talking to different engineers, developers, and they found, I started finding, very commonly in this community, and this isn't a shame or a judgment, it's just kind of a fact, is a lot of developers have a very specific skill set. You guys engineer things, I engineer people. So I learned early on in this community, how can I help get your stuff to other places? Do that marketing, do those, that sales stuff, do the webinar, doing those kinds of things. And even to the point of, I think, who runs an open source community in here? Who's a maintainer or someone like that? Could you use help that aren't coders? How? What would you want?
I run a community for the open source project, and we're building a global user group, and lots of help with that. New leaders, new people to document how those leaders can find speakers.
Yeah, so running user groups.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
that's awesome. We'll take one more because I know there's other people that want to talk. Sure.
Helping just get the message out on social media or whatever, and these things, these bits that we don't understand, and helping our web presence look like it didn't come from the 1990s.
All open source websites are gorgeous, aren't they? Just functional,
Yeah.
they work.
So marketing and website development.
Yeah, I love it.
There was one more.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
catch you in the back. Translations. Yeah, translation and issue triage. Yeah. Awesome.
So of those three people that are in those groups, if you have those skills, go talk to them. They'll be in the back when we're done.
Did you want to
Go
add
ahead.
anything to
I
that?
think you covered it perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect, yeah.
Other questions? We have just a couple more minutes for questions.
I want to follow up on that as a coder. What could the coders do to help welcome the non-coders, or describe, what the purpose is and how they're thinking about it, so that you can have that discussion between the coders and non-coders. We don't always know how to talk to people.
I think he wants to come talk now next.
Come talk at user groups.
Yeah.
These are the people that are interested in contributing code to you. So when you see a local user group, as a developer, raise your hand to come give a 10, 20-minute talk. Tell them about your day. Tell them about what's bothering you in your issue stack. How many issues you have. Do you have good first issues? Do a guidance of how to submit a quick PR against one of your own good first issues in your own repo. That will go miles and miles for people at the event.
Yeah, and
So I'm mentoring, I have this 2 million lines of code, and then I'm looking for all maintainers to maintain first PR type issues, documenting them. I know it's hard to document, but some of them do a great job of documenting kernel maintainers. So I point my mentees to those and say, hey, go find these. So that would be a great help. You're right, that's right, that's great.
I can take one more question.
This is actually in response. I'm a tech writer. I work on Tempo, which is one of Grafana's open source distributed tracing projects. And providing minimum viable documentation with every PR that you do, if you're doing a docs as code, provide it. If you are one of the maintainers and one of the lead developers, do it as an example, and then reference those PRs in your how to contribute. Say, look, it doesn't have to be this big thing. Just make sure that somebody understands how to use it, what it is, and why they should care. Those 3 things, with an example, goes a long way, and it doesn't take a lot of time. Be the example you want others to follow.
Beautiful.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to have a quick wrap up to let the panelists give us their top 60 seconds or less for how to help people thrive in open source. We'll start with Ruth.
Yeah, so I have 2 things. Recognize the smallest voices. The first meeting I joined in open source, I sat down, I was just, listening to people talk. And then somebody recognized me in the room, and it made me come back. So recognizing the smallest voices go a long way to retaining your contributors and getting them to come back. Those small efforts that they make, little PRs, documentation changes, recognize them and say thank you because it gets them coming back. That's a very good trick to get people to come back to your community. And then the second one is create room for mistakes. I understand I am a maintainer, and I understand how difficult sometimes it is to, when you build software, you want it to work perfectly. And even when we build software, we make mistakes while we build the software. So why not create room when people are trying to modify the software to make mistakes? So I also understand that security is one of the reasons why maintainers, are very, they hold back for new contributors sometimes, and even trust. But when you create room for people to make mistakes, they learn from those mistakes and they will come back. So those are my 2 top tips.
Okay. Shuah, you go next.
Yes. So retaining people, welcoming communities is definitely being helpful. And I think that contributors that have been doing contributions for a long time and maintainers, if they share their failures, that will help newcomers going, okay, failures are okay, it's fine. They made mistakes and they got here, and I can do too. So sharing those in various settings could be helpful as well. And remembering that today's new developers, if everybody remembers that today's new developers are our future, meaning future leaders, future contributors, future experts, future maintainers, and open source leaders, that really will I think, make a difference on how we experts and maintainers and treat the newcomers. Another thing is that the mentorships are a way to the future, really, paving the future. So, and they change lives. They change so many lives.
What was the question again? Because I forgot it.
Your question is your top tip that they've gone to,
Yes.
but so you can give an extra one for how to help people thrive in open source.
So I think this goes both ways, whether you're wanting to get involved or you already are involved and helping other people get involved, is talk to everyone and don't be a jerk. I'm making t-shirts for that later. But because you never know who that next contributor is going to be. They could be sitting in this room, they could be walking the hallway, and vice versa. You never know what you might find from another project, who's out there, what's going on. And I know it can be nerve-wracking. I know it can be scary to talk to new people. And even what I just did, I actually remembered the question, but I intentionally asked her because don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. What was it? It's okay if you didn't remember. It's okay if you forgot or you don't know how to do a PR yet because you're terrified you'll blow something up. Just don't be afraid to ask. Talk to everyone possible at every level, and you never know. The next person you talk to, like she said, might be the person that fixes your problem you have.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to give my top tip. My top tip is to ask people for specific things that you know that they're good at. So I've gotten involved so the reason I got involved in the CNCF Contributor Strategy Technical Advisory Group is because Paris Pittman wanted someone to write a project health guide. And she was like, you know about project health, why don't you come over and just help us write this guide? So I wrote that guide, and then I kind of stuck around and eventually ended up chair of the technical advisory group. But I got involved and then stuck around because her asking me for something specific made it really clear that she valued my expertise, she wanted me there, they needed help. And so, think about the people who are good at things within your community and ask them. I mean, the worst thing that they can say is, no, I'm too busy, no, I can't do that for whatever reason. But more times than not, they'll generally be happy to help you out. And with that, I think we're just about out of time. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, everyone.